You can't replace part of the brain. Like, you
treat them the same.
The source of truth for the medtech industry.
Coexists with the prophets.
Robot understands things automatically.
Number one show in the medtech industry.
So Stryker got ahead of that and changed in the 90s, built $1 billion company that held up high, a lot of things.
State of MedTech.
Their host, Omar M. Khatib.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. I'm excited to see the triumphant return of the people's champion, Joseph High on the Authment, a crowd favorite. Joseph, I think this is like your third or fourth time on this show, which is a record. So how does that feel?
Oh, it feels amazing. I'm glad that we're getting to do it. And the last couple of minutes have been pretty hilarious, including
absolutely
the ripping of my hairdo and my profile pic on LinkedIn and all kinds of good stuff.
I mean, your new profile photo is fantastic. You have a great head for a bald man. You know, it's a good shape. But, you know, we just had to update that photo. It looked too like inmate-ish, you know?
Exactly. Yeah.
One day we will actually record the usual 10 to 15 minute conversation that you and I have off air before these things go live. So I feel like those are just chock full of entertainment. But first of all, Joseph, thanks for coming on the show. A lot of exciting things going on at Echo. We'll get into that in a moment. But probably the biggest thing is that there's been a lot of organizational change. Specifically, you have a new role and title. So talk to us about that role and title. We'll jump right into what's going on at Echo, because I think it's really fascinating, especially from a business model perspective, what you guys are doing. And we'll talk about the innovation as well. But maybe we'll start with like your new role.
Sure. So over the course of about the past 6 months, the company has been kind enough to give me downstream marketing for our Sensora team, as well as account management on top of sales. And so now I have responsibility for, that entire commercial department for the organization, which I'm really proud to be in.
Fantastic. It's a lot of fun. So roughly how many direct reports do you have at this point?
Close to 10 right now. We had we had an interesting year last year where we pulled back a little bit to try to get our sea legs back underneath us to make some changes that needed to be made. And so this has been it's really been a rebuilding time over the past 18 months. And I think that's sort of par for the course, if you will, within a startup or an early stage company where, people think that the line looks like this, but it kind of reminds me of that thing that I've seen online where, there's a lot of Google swiggly lines that are kind of going all over the place. And that's, that's just part of what it's like to be in an early stage organization. But we're making quite a bit of headway. We've hired the right team. We've got the right people that are now here on the bus, and super exciting things that are occurring.
It's definitely not new to you, given your background in various leadership roles, like to have a lot of like direct reports. But wondering for some of the new leaders who are listening, who go from, let's say, 1 to 2, maybe 3 direct reports is one thing, but when you jump up to like 5, 6, 7, it becomes more difficult. Any advice to them that you would give about managing that many direct reports?
No, I've had teams of 100 and I've had teams of 2. And so I think the big thing is just that first and foremost, not everybody is the same, right? And so you've got to use situational leadership each and every day with each and every different personality. And I think that's been a big lesson for me throughout sort of my career, is that early on, I basically wanted to treat everybody as though they were just like me. And that's just not the case. Everybody has different wants and needs and desires and is motivated in different ways, shapes, or forms. And so you've really got to take an individualized approach and care about that individual person that you're dealing with to ensure that they're getting to where they need to be on their journey.
Yeah, it makes sense. Well, it's nothing like what's his name, Jensen Huang, over the CEO of NVIDIA. He has 55 direct reports, but his thing is that he hates doing one-on-one. So his philosophy is that if I tell somebody in a one-on-one meeting, why is it that person gets to hear that information or that advice, not others? So he just does, I think, like massive group meetings with all his direct reports. It's pretty interesting. I don't know. It's a $1 trillion company. So like, what do I know?
Well, yeah, I mean, look, who am I to tell him he's doing anything right or wrong? But I will say that I'm a big fan of really getting to know people sort of on a hyper individualized approach, right? Knowing their birthday, knowing their favorite things to do, knowing their family members, knowing, what makes them tick, I think is really sort of the cornerstone of building a high performing team.
Yeah, I completely agree. There's a friend of mine. He's a serial entrepreneur in the medtech space, Sam Mahmood. In his company, he made a comment to me, and I was like, "Oh, that's a really good point." Where he said, like, the goal as an entrepreneur or as a hiring manager, like, if you're able to hire two people who either are best friends or become best friends, and they get to go to work together, it's like a massive unlock for your business. And I was like, "That's actually a good point. I never thought of it like that."
Well,
You
I think
know?
I saw that, and I think me and you had this discussion. There was someone that posted on LinkedIn, and it really drove me nuts about not becoming friends with the people that you work with. And I don't know. I'm not suggesting that you're going to become friends with every single person that you work with, but I think the more trust that's built, the closer that you get, the closer the friendship and the bond becomes, the more you want to do to see each other succeed. So, when I saw that posted, it didn't make any sense to me. And I've become a big fan of really trying to get as close as I can to the folks that are on my team.
I love that. And I think it's part of it. It's about sharing the same values. I don't think people have to become best buds and go on a like weekend tear with each other. But I think like the people you work with, if they're people that you would normally just hang out with or go to seek advice from, or you would allow your families around, like that, I think is like, it's really valuable. And I think your point is good, which is you just put yourself in a better position to succeed. So good transition, which is, so Echo, the world's first smart stethoscope. It's one of my favorite. I have a list of like, I don't know how many. I should probably put a list together, but it is one of my favorite companies just because, again, it takes the skill set of a specialist. It reimagines like traditional hardware, puts software in it, and puts it at scale. So great success story as a B2C company. But then in the last couple of years, you guys have made this push with your new product Sensor, which we'll talk about in a moment, to be more of an enterprise B2B solution, which is it's a completely different function for a company, right? And we've seen a lot of companies in the consumer space say, hey, okay, we want to become a medical device, go do the B2B route, and they fail. And so what has that been like for you guys? You guys had some great news at LSU come out. So maybe kind of give us an overview on that.
Yeah, so Jason Bellet, who you recently had on your episode, and Connor Landgraf, who are two co-founders, CEO and COO, over the course of about the past 7 years, have really done an amazing job of bringing the stethoscope into the digital age. And Jason spoke a lot about that on your previous podcast. And what's been really interesting is that they've taken this B2C approach where they've made the stethoscope sexy, and I'm sure you've seen it on the last podcast. But I mean, now the stethoscope has a digital interface. It has a 3-lead ECG built into it. There's nothing else like this, and so that has really been the impetus to over 500,000 clinicians wanting to put this into practice out in the real world. I think the interesting thing is that stethoscope is just one component of really the entire ecosystem that we offer. And so it is the important driver of the algorithms, but it's not the only aspect. And so what's been interesting is highlighting the fact that we've got this amazing tool with this digital stethoscope, but really beginning to educate the market that it's so much more than that. It's a point of care cardiac disease detection tool, not just a stethoscope. And that may sound very easy to the audience to go out and do, but when people see your product is one thing, it is very difficult to get them to see that exact same thing through a different lens. And so that's what we've really been trying to do over the course of the last, 12 to 18 months is to really create a new market after we went and disrupted an existing market. And so it's really two companies within one. And that's been an interesting journey, and one that has certainly pushed me and the team, I think, to, to a place where we're giving this everything that we've got. It's taken all of our brain power to get us to where we are today.
When it comes to creating like a new market like that, what have been some of the challenges when you deal, directly with the market in terms of trying to drive adoption?
Yeah, it's interesting. And I think this is another topic that the two of us speak about frequently, is just that, I do spend a lot of time on LinkedIn. I believe in it as a platform, and I've got a lot of people that I follow on there because they've been mentors of mine. I learn from them. I pick up different things about leadership and go to market and what have you. But what I notice is that there are a lot of folks on LinkedIn who claim to sort of be these experts who have done it all and know it all. And I think if I were sitting in sort of a board seat, or if I were sitting on a hiring panel for a company, and that person presented to me with that sort of mindset, they would probably be the first to be cut from the interview. And the reason that I bring that up is because these early stage commercializations take a robust amount of collaboration and teamwork and cross-functional collaboration. And so, what I have noticed, and I would say that this is the earliest stage product that I have ever been with, to try to build messaging and to build out a market to help to direct the product team toward what the market is telling us, and to really begin to build those super users and early KOLs. And so for me, what has been really interesting about it is, for example, how much time I spend with the product team. That is not something that, quite frankly, in other roles where I've maybe been with later stage companies or some of the strategics, that you get a lot of exposure to. But it is super, super important. And in this case, we have, and you may know this gentleman, but we have got an amazing product leader named Tico Blumenthal who works for us. And he's been with a number of different companies, including Intuitive. And so to have that partnership where we can have really difficult discussions about maybe what the product team thought was best, but what the actual market is telling us, and to see how quickly he takes that advice and iterates on it and gets it back into the hands of our users to get feedback has been amazing. Working with the likes of training and finance and engineering has also been something that, quite frankly, I've had some exposure to in the past. But now when you're in this earlier stage, those are the people that you have to be relying upon on a frequent basis to ensure that, your margins are right, that the technology is working every time that you put it in someone's hands, that when you go and you actually implement and you train, that the workflows are designed properly and that it works the way it's supposed to out the gates without any hiccups. And so those have all been really, really amazing experiences over the past 18 months. And, I'm back to LinkedIn. I've tried to highlight some of those folks like Emily Lastowski and Subu and, my sales team members and David and Andrew, Philip Gaines, who is on our account management team. Those are the folks that are really making this happen day to day. And they should be celebrated because it is a really difficult job. It's very hard when you go to someone and say, this is a point of care cardiac disease detection tool. You've never seen it before. You've never heard of it. You don't think you need it in your life. It's going to add 15 seconds to your workflow. And by the way, it's something your patients need. Most people don't want to change. Most people don't want to to take that leap. And so it's really pushing the rock uphill to find those innovators and early adopters early on. And then having a team like this supporting you to go have those difficult discussions and really push the market to begin to adopt.
Quick commercial break for marketing leaders and sales leaders. I don't have to tell you this, but it's worth reiterating that the time clinicians have to meet with medical reps is limited. You know this and feel this. It's been a challenge for med device sellers for decades. Now, with the rising workloads and patient care demands, clinicians' times are shrinking even more. And the window for your sellers and your sales team to meet with these clinicians consists of pretty much just minutes in a busy hospital hallway. The reality is your sellers have to make every second count or someone else will. They must be concise, they got to be efficient, and use highly relevant information to make the most out of these brief interactions. ShowPad is all about focusing your sellers on the art of selling, which is about building trust and relationships. And while there's science, the ShowPad solution handles the behind-the-scenes prep and follow-up work to make your team more effective. The best part is that you get insights on content and training performance so you can make strategic decisions and invest more in what works based on data. ShowPad helps your sales and marketing teams spend their time in more productive, high-impact ways with a multiplying effect on your revenue results and growing your pipeline. So to learn more, go to showpad.com/State of MedTech. Now, let's get back to the show.
Yeah, I think what's interesting as a case study is that, you know, for Echo, you guys are at a point like on the consumer side that you're definitely into the mainstream market because Echo's been commercially available for 10 years now. How long has it been?
About 10 years, 7 to 10 years.
Yeah, so it's commercially available. I mean, I have one of my cardiologists, I posted about it. He uses the device, right? And I think maybe that with the adoption curve, a mistake that sometimes a company might make is assuming that the early adopters and innovators for V1 of the product are going to be the same early adopters and innovators for V2 or a different division.
Yeah.
I mean, that could be wrong though. Have you seen any of the early adopters or innovators from the B2C side of Echo also turn into early adopters for this? No, not a single one.
Not in particular. You know, when this device was being built, when we started to think about the algorithms, the team that was here right around the time when we received FDA approval for the first algorithm, they had this feedback that this was built for cardiology, and it's able to do a lot of things that a cardiologist is able to do, but the real value that the technology brings is further upstream than that in primary care. And so, you know, early on, a lot of our early users of the stethoscope itself were cardiologists or structural heart teams. But in fact, where it's really making its mark is much further upstream, where a lot of patients are going in to see their PCPs for annual visits. They're being missed. And it's not the physician's fault. It's the fact that they've been given a 200-year-old device in the stethoscope that hasn't come into the digital age. And so now what this is able to do is, again, 15 seconds, they place it on their chest, and it's able to detect all these cardiac disease states that otherwise would be missed. And so kind of going back to making that shift from B2C to B2B, we have had to really sort of take a couple of steps back to take a number of steps forward in terms of retargeting, readdressing our messaging, readdressing our value propositions, our pricing, our workflows. That looks a whole lot different in a PCP's office than it does in a cardiology environment.
Yeah, and you know what I find interesting about the PCP world, just because on the agency side, we're working with different companies that have to target PCPs, is that unlike surgeons or unlike specialists, these people are not used to technology coming to their doorsteps. And so you would imagine that like they might be more receptive or excited about it. But in reality, I feel like this is the hardest part of medical devices, which would be, I used to think it was surgeons, but I think it's actually selling to PCPs. Would you say the same thing?
No doubt about it. And I think the big piece that has been just eye-opening to us is really how much pressure these PCPs are under on a day-to-day basis. The amount of, I think on your last episode, you were talking about the fact that they really have to be a jack of all trades, right? They not only have to know a little bit about everything, but on top of that, they're given a very minute amount of time that they're able to spend with their patients. And I'm painting this with a bit of a broad brush. Some PCPs, certainly in a concierge environment or a senior environment, in a lot of cases have more time. But your average PCP is down to maybe 10 minutes with a patient that they've got before they need to see the next patient. And so you can imagine that with an older device like a traditional stethoscope, and the fact that they're being pressed for time and they're being asked to find all these different things with that patient, things can get missed. And what our early paper at Mass Gen showed was that, for example, about 60% of patients that go in to see their PCP that have structural heart murmurs are being missed. 60%. And so that's a big number, and you can only imagine what the sort of the deleterious effects are if that patient is potentially missed. We know that the lion's share, maybe up to 75% of patients with heart failure don't get diagnosed until they're in the emergency room department. And so at that point, it's oftentimes too late. And so for us to be able to go in and offer something further upstream, it does now give PCPs a tool that in a lot of ways reduces some of the cognitive burden. So the way that we train to this is that it's given to a medical assistant in this form. It doesn't even look like a stethoscope. It's given to the medical assistant. That medical assistant takes that sensor, places it on the chest for 15 seconds. And by the time the physician walks in the room, they know if that patient has a structural murmur, they know if that patient has low ejection fraction or AFib. And so it only leads to augmenting that physician's capabilities. But in terms of selling to PCPs, it is difficult, but I think in a world where we're moving toward value-based care, it's certainly getting a lot of people's attention. In a world where finding disease earlier can get people into, say, a TAVR. That is certainly something that has been an eye-opener to a lot of our customers. And then just like anything else, just like the world both of us come from in surgery, finding these innovative early adopter physicians like we found with Dr. Brian Murphy at NCH has been really fun. Because to me, that is really what makes a product, is when you find those first couple of physicians that say, I am going to champion this because I believe in what it can do for my patients. And they go and they tell the world. That's when you really start to see that domino effect occur.
Yeah, I feel like that's like probably the reason why both you and I love startups is that the art and science behind like finding and unlocking an early adopter. Because I think that what's interesting is that a lot of times with early adopters, they have not become like an opinion leader, but through your technology, they kind of become activated, right?
Yeah.
And so it's kind of exciting to see that happen,
It is. And I tell you, finding those people is difficult. And I know that at times the sales team must want to put their hands around my neck because of, how I'm constantly sort of preaching about the fact that you've got to cast a fairly wide net to find some of these folks who can be innovators. They're not easy to find. And I think I've heard you on another podcast of yours saying, it's often not the person that you might think it would be, right? The person that is sort of the chairman of the department or something along those lines, that may not be a true innovator or an early adopter. And so you've got to really pound the pavement. You've got to be that barbarian that we've talked about in the past, where you get 100 doors slammed in your face before you find somebody that says, oh, you know what? Yeah, I'm willing to take this journey with you to change the paradigm. I'm willing to be the first. I'm willing to, go through some of these couple of steps forward and a step back type of scenarios where maybe the product needs a little tweaking or the workflow needs a little tweaking. And they're okay with that because they're true innovators. And those are the people that really help to begin a market and really light it on fire.
When it comes to these primary care clinicians, again, yeah, very hard to find. It's not like, if you look at surgery, aside from the large annual conference, there's always going to be like a subspecialty conference for some very specific procedure and stuff. Primary care physicians don't really have that. So where have you guys found to be like the most, valuable traction channels? Like, how are you finding these people? Like what are some of the things that you guys are having to do just to find them?
Yeah. So, like a lot of other detection or diagnostic devices, oftentimes the way to sort of find that person is through someone who is severely impacted by that person. And so what we have found is that the VPs of cardiovascular service lines, the structural heart team, the heart failure team, the CEOs of hospitals understand the importance of early disease detection and what that can mean for patients, what that can mean for their top line and bottom line, what that means for referral patterns in cardiology and so on and so forth. And so oftentimes it's starting with those folks because they really understand the impact that this can have, and working backwards where they say, oh, you should speak to this person. Maybe it's the VP of population health, or maybe it's the dyad leader for primary care. They are typically the ones that are helping us to look back, and say, these are the folks you should be meeting with. And then really it becomes sort of a triangulated approach where we're working with both of those departments in order to make this a reality.
With any medical technology, whether it's a surgical robot or smart stethoscope or anything, we don't live in the world where the physician is the sole decision maker. You have supporting cast such as the PAs, the nurses, the staff. Who are some of the other decision makers that you guys are having to learn more about to influence in this new business model that Echo has?
Yeah. So the thing that we've talked about in the past on other episodes, and that I'm a very big fan of over the years, is that there's typically one decision maker within a hospital or health system that gets things done and sees the strategy, the economics, the clinical benefits almost better than anyone else. And that's an executive. That's a CEO oftentimes. But most people, for whatever reason, don't want to go knock on that door. They don't want to send an introduction letter to that person. They don't want to go have that door potentially slammed in their face because they're afraid of it. But that, in my opinion, is one of the ways to get a technology to a point to where it's beginning to get adopted at a pretty rapid clip, is when you go to the very top first, because then they know who all the players are. They know who all the stakeholders need to be. They know who they will listen to and who they won't. So I think that's a big piece of it, is training the team and building confidence in the team to go get in front of executive stakeholders, number one. The second thing is that many of these organizations now have service line leaders, and they are becoming more and more, important in the chain of decision making. So cardiovascular service line, a number of companies have robotic service line directors, primary care or physician service service lines. And so these folks are subject matter experts and have a lot of say in terms of, what gets implemented, what gets piloted, what gets potentially looked at and what doesn't. And they know, again, they know the strategic benefits of it. They know the financial and the clinical benefits. And so to me, that has been a group that has been extremely important to our early adoption of this technology within the marketplace.
Yeah, and I think it's important to keep to understand that. I feel that, and I'm not gonna, as tempting as I am, because they are publicly traded and I'm a shareholder, I'm not gonna comment which company this is, but I feel like there's a lot of companies in our space that are still kind of running this old playbook on how they drive adoption, and understanding the fact that the game has really changed and there are other people to be influenced. Like, I don't know, like I personally, I've seen it anecdotally, but I personally believe that, there might be some clinical physician adopters who, let's say, may not be interested in your product, but they respect their PA or their nurse practitioner or nurse's like opinion, and that person might see something that the physician doesn't see originally, and they might actually persuade them otherwise. I always feel like that can happen. Have you guys experienced that at all?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, in our scenario, what's really unique about this is that the actual user of the device, more often than not, is a medical assistant. And, medical assistants are not trained to auscultate or listen to the heart and lungs. They probably are not on the radar of a whole lot of companies in terms of a target to go get in front of. But really, at the end of the day, our programs really come down to the strength of the users and how happy they are and how easy they find the product to use and the benefits that they see when they're using this on their patients. And so, yeah, we have seen that. And, I know what company you're talking about. I know it well. And I've seen far too many ex-employees go out and try to run the exact same playbook. And it just, quite frankly, doesn't work.
That's exactly it.
It is super unique in a lot of respects. When you're a monopoly and there's nothing else out there, you can make certain plays that, quite frankly, other people can't. And I just see it a lot, and I get asked by a lot of people, "Well, why aren't you doing it like you used to do it here, there, or otherwhere? In anywhere else that you've been?" And the answer is, you've got to be flexible. You've got to really understand the market that you're calling on, and you've got to build your playbook around that experience. You can draw from your past experiences, but you've really got to be living in the moment. And that has to do with the people that you hire, the way you interact internally, the way you present yourself externally, and everything in between.
I 100% agree. I love that you said that, which is to build your playbook around your market. Because I think when you come with a quote unquote playbook, which is this really outdated vernacular in our industry, it just drives me nuts. Like, I think if you want a shortcut to like failure, or at least in my mind, is that anytime if I'm in an intro meeting or something and someone says like, "Oh, we hired blah, blah, blah from blah, blah, blah," and they brought the playbook, I'm like, they're going to fail. Because essentially it's bringing all these assumptions from a different market, a different technology, a different user base in a different time till now, and saying, yeah, this can just work again. Why not?
Yeah, and I think I think companies have to be honest with themselves, and I think the individuals that are interviewing with those companies have to be honest with themselves as well. In that, I see a lot of people that claim to be early stage type employees. They claim to be these barbarians, if you will. But in reality, they're used to being part of strategics where you have large marketing budgets, you have a product that works every single time. The entire script has been written for them. And all of a sudden they show up, in social media or in the marketplace, pounding their chest saying, "Look at what I've done." When in reality, and to use a term that one of my favorite people has come up with, is they were born on third and thought they hit a triple, right? This stage of an organization takes very unique people. It takes people who have an entrepreneurial mindset. It takes people who are okay with being told no 1,000 times before they get a first yes. And that is the day in the life of somebody in a startup. People looking at you like you're crazy when you tell them what this new device costs. And they say, well, why would I do that? And so those are the kind of people that I would say I look for. And they understand that you've constantly got to be iterating and improving, and you can't look back and use what you've done in the past. You can only learn from it and use some of those same plays. But if you're stuck in the past, if you're hiring the same people that, got you here, they're not going to get you there. I can promise you that right now.
100%. And just for the audience listening, I have to bring this up. So what Joseph, when we talk about barbarians, actually, let me impress you and see if I can. Yep. Oh, let me tell you, there's few things I take pleasure in, but one of those things is when I know exactly where a specific book is in my library. So the book that Joseph's referring to is this great book by Lawrence Miller called Barbarians to Bureaucrats, Corporate Lifecycle Strategies. And I'm bringing up the chart so people understand what exactly is a barbarian. And for those who are, listening on Apple, you're going to have to go check this out on Spotify or YouTube. But essentially, this is the corporate life cycle. And just to define it, so you see barbarians are here in this integration phase. It's defined as the leader of crisis and conquest who commands the corporation on the march of rapid growth. Okay. And again, it's not to say that all these other people are not important. I think it's important to understand that everybody plays a role in a certain life cycle of a company. But to go back to that definition of like somebody who essentially commands the corporation on the march of rapid growth, leader of crisis and conquest, it takes a certain personality type, and it's not like a good or bad thing. Like, for example, Joseph, I don't know if you would share the sentiment. I would fail personally if I went back to work for somebody. I can't function in a Striker, a Medtronic, an Intuitive even right now, because they're past that phase and it requires a certain type of personality to fit into the organization. I wouldn't fit into that organization,
Yeah. And you hit the nail on the head. There's nothing good or bad necessarily about those different personalities. It's just, you need to know what your personality is. You need to know what the market is in need of as you're building out a team and hiring at different stages. And so the interesting thing that overlays onto that model that you just showed is crossing the chasm. And so if you look at it, in my opinion, really right up until you're probably in that early majority stage, you need barbarians. And then you start to need, sort of builders who are building in better processes and who are, really good at sort of improving the way things look and feel out in the marketplace. But right up until that point, you need people who like the challenge of being told no. You like people who are at that point in their life where they don't really care what anybody thinks of them. They're all right with being sort of the crazy ones out there, right? They believe so heavily in what you're doing that they're willing to go out and be evangelists and kick down doors if they can't open them. And so that's the kind of folks that are here right now at Echo, is that we realize that we are disrupting a market that is very difficult to disrupt. People would much rather just use a stethoscope than to implement a cardiac disease detection tool. But I can tell you right now, as sort of God is my witness, we are going to see this thing through. And the early evidence that we're getting, the early customers that are so happy with what they're seeing from this technology are just showing us that this is going to finally find that chasm crossing at some point in the near future.
100%. And look, just because you said it, at some point I'll have a producer who does this live for me and not me, but I'm so damn good at this. While you were speaking, I grabbed the chart that we just discussed, overlaid it on the technology adoption curve. Let's see how it shakes out. And it does. You're absolutely right. It makes a lot of sense. Here we go. All right. So if we look at, this is the barbarians to bureaucrat curve. Okay. So we need to look at here on the far left, the barbarians. So if we phase this out a little bit as the technology adoption curve is behind it, that barbarian phase is right there as you start to ramp up from the early adopter phase and gaining momentum into the to essentially cross that chasm. And I think what's important to point out is that the stage it echoes at right now is, again, you're in that innovator phase, which means you're dealing with more of profit decision making. Profit's defined as the visionary who creates the breakthrough and the human energy to propel the company forward. Okay. And again, what's interesting about this is that I think both from a decision making standpoint internally, but also the adopters you get, right? Both those types of people are in an innovator phase, profit phase, where you're trying to get a breakthrough, you're trying to generate this energy. And once you get to a certain point on the adoption curve, it's early adopters. On the decision-making curve, it's barbarians. That's when there's this like sort of conquest, right, of rapid growth, both decision-making in the corporate style, but also in the adoption curve. I think it's fascinating. I can nerd out on this all day long.
Oh, so can I love it.
Yeah.
And there's so much that goes into this phase as well.
And personally, like, I wonder, okay, let me ask you a personal question here, okay? And this doesn't mean that people can't change, but people have preferences, okay? So if we look at this adoption curve, okay, I'm going to keep the corporate cycle on there, the barbarians, the bureaucrats, and the technology adoption curve. At what point does Joseph Authement stop being Joseph Authement, and it's time to go to the next thing? As our like close friend, our dear friend who's no longer with us, Chris Sells, would say, is like, hey, I like to build a path over the mountain. Once that path is there, I got to go on to a new mountain. What point would you say that is for you?
Yeah, I would say that
as it relates to this chart.
Yeah, for me, it's really all about new challenges. And I think that I have lived in the prophet, barbarian, and the builder stage, and I've been comfortable in each of those. But for me, it's all about building something new, and it's all about forging something new. My parents would tell you, if you met them, that since I've been a young kid, I'm a challenger at heart, and so I've never really done all that well in environments where, there are people telling me I have to follow a certain set of rules. I like to make the rules. I like to make the markets. I like to go and prove people wrong. And so for me, I think back to a more recent experience in an organization that I was with that had been acquired by a large strategic. And, the first 2 years were glorious. We were still, doing great. But when that strategic really started to sink their teeth into it and say, this is the way we've always done it before, and therefore this is the way you have to do it, that's when I knew that I was finished and needed to go on and find something new.
Got it. Yeah. And I think if I had to go back here, I'm gonna hold you to, because I want it. The people demand an answer. They're gonna say that you have to hold his hands to the fire. I would guess that you function well up until somewhere around this point, because at this point you start really penetrating the mainstream market. But at that point, like, you start exiting this builder and explorer phase, and there's nothing built to explore. And again, what makes like let's use our industry's, in my opinion, most like amazing unicorn story, which is Intuitive, right? Intuitive was able to continue growing from how many years ago when I started this industry, their market cap was like 50 or 60 billion, and now it's 160 billion, right? That only happens because they said, hey, we have exited the point where we are playing around and experimenting and everything. We have a system, everybody plugs into it and just works on that system, right? And that's why they were able to say, so there's a need for that. I think once this builder and explorer phase starts to end, someone with your leadership and innovation style only ossifies once you stay here. Like, I feel like this is where a lot of great talent dies.
Yeah, for sure. And look, I was at Intuitive when there were no robots in my particular area, and so I had to be that prophet. I had to be that barbarian. But I stayed for over a decade into building out strategic accounts departments, and I was in more of that builder phase. But you're correct. I know a lot of people there that I love still to this day, a lot of friends. I'm really, really proud of what's gone on there. But I think every single one of those people would say, I would not fit in that environment today. And I'm not shy to say that. It's just not who I am.
Yeah. And I think, the big thing on the corporate style that I forgot to point out is that when you start exiting that, when you go from prophet, barbarian, builder, and explorer, and you start exiting that phase, a lot of it's essentially reliance on principles and processes. And what makes a startup person is that they're very comfortable not relying on a principle or process, kind of bring their own principles and process. And again, building that playbook around the needs of that market. But once that's in place, I mean, I don't know about you, I get really restless. I get bored, someone once told me at a conference, they said, "Oh, like you're a startup guy, how Omar?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm a startup guy." And they're like, "Oh, that just means that you don't know how to get along with people." And I'm like, "Yeah, that's probably what it is." Because like, in a larger corporate environment, part of it is like, being a little diplomatic and stuff, so.
Well, there's certainly an angle behind that, right? I mean, when you're dealing with people who are constantly challenging the status quo, that's not exactly the easiest personality to always deal with. Now, with that said, I will tell you that, kind of going back to Echo, this is an amazing group of people to get along with. And we have really built this strong foundation of trust. And so therefore, the fact that we trust one another, we're really able to challenge each other. I mean, just yesterday morning, had a conversation with one of the folks on my team who was like, "Who are you this morning? Did something happen to you? You woke up in a bad mood or on the wrong side of the bed? Like, what's going on with you?" And it didn't upset me. It didn't bother me. I was glad that he was challenging me. That tells me that he trusts me and that he can have that kind of dialogue with me. And so what's interesting is that I've just found the later I have gotten in these strategics, whether through acquisition or just being there for a while, you have to really tiptoe around those sort of conversations because everything's super political and you don't know if you're upsetting the wrong person or if you're going to say the wrong things. That's not the culture here at all. This is a very familial type of culture where it's like, hey, if I've done something that's not right, I want you to tell me that so that I can continue to improve and get better. But that's a two-way street. I'm going to do the exact same thing with you to ensure that you continue to grow and succeed.
100%. Something I want to make sure, I know we're running up in time, and I appreciate coming back on the show. I wanted to touch on because I thought it was very interesting. It's an interesting angle to the market. But you guys had this very exciting press that came out around LSU. Can you talk a little bit about that and what's the angle there in terms of your adoption criteria?
Yeah, so I don't know that I would say that there's an angle necessarily. I'll tell you just a brief story. So I was in 1997. I was recruited at 5'11" as one of the top swimmers in the United States. And LSU, for me, growing up as a kid in Louisiana, had just always been the place that I wanted to be. And so I got recruited all around the United States, Stanford, Michigan, University of Texas, what have you. But being a Louisiana boy and always just growing up in that environment, going to Tiger Stadium, that was super important to me to stay close to home. And so I ended up going to LSU on a full swimming scholarship. But not long after I got there, within the first 6 months of going there, I had a career, ending injury. And so any hopes or dreams that I had of fulfilling the rest of that swimming scholarship went by the wayside. And for me, knowing that we have a device that could potentially detect diseases earlier, detect issues earlier, and cardiac disease is on the front of every newspaper over the course of the last couple of years. LeBron James's son, Pete Maravich, who went to LSU, had cardiovascular issues, died of it. You had everything that happened with the Buffalo Bills last year with Hamlin. And so for me, it was just very important to be able to give back to a place that I love and loved so much, but never really got to see that athletic career come to fruition. And I think that, with the use of this technology, we can pick up on things that otherwise might go undetected and allow for these student athletes to get what they need sooner in terms of treatment so that they can prolong that career. And so it got picked up by something like, 400 news stations, all the major markets picked up on it. And I really think it's because this cardiac disease detection is something that affects not just seniors, where we, the world that we play in every day, but it affects a lot of young athletes as well.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I love that. And again, what I love, Echo's an established company at this point, but this division of Echo is really a startup, and every startup's quest is kind of a quest for a scalable business model. So it's exciting to see like that press release kind of came out of left field for me. I was like, oh, like it makes sense, but I wasn't expecting that, right? And so it's exciting to see you and your team sort of experiment to figure out like what's the right adoption use case, what are the business models that work and everything. So as we kind of wrap up, I figured this last few minutes we got with you, we'll have a little bit of fun. But you and I are both cynical observers of activity and behavior on LinkedIn, and I'm wondering what are some things that you've seen on LinkedIn that just that really grind your gears? Because there's no shortage of that.
Yeah, well, it kind of goes back to, in my opinion. Look, let's face it. LinkedIn is basically it's out there to help build brand. It's out there to feed a lot of egos, if you will. Hopefully, it is a spot for education and improvement. That is my desire, and to deliver messages about really game-changing technologies like this. But I would say the biggest thing lately for me is just, again, the folks that are beginning to build themselves as experts in a particular field. And yet, when you really kind of look at their resume, they've never really lived in the arena, right? They've never been bloodied in battle. They've never really been up to their elbows in it. And now all of a sudden they're an expert and have all the answers on what's going on with a particular technology or technologies in a particular market. And so, I chuckle at it. I've got so much going on my plate professionally and personally that I don't let it get to me too much. But it is something that makes me chuckle and kind of scratch my head and say, maybe I should go be an expert in I don't know, offshore fishing or duck hunting or something along those lines.
Yeah, I hear you. I think it's I appreciate when people sort of go out on a limb on certain things, but sometimes for certain topics we're hearing from the wrong people because the right people don't. It's almost like, you know what it is, Joseph. You'll appreciate this. It's like politics. The people who should actually be politicians have no interest in being politicians. And so the wrong ones end up usually being politicians,
Yeah, chances are the people who are the real experts. And look, I believe LinkedIn is a good tool, and I try to use it to educate the market about what we're able to do with what I think is a game-changing technology for patients. But I think that there's this group of people that just have an ego that they need to feed, and to me, that's really that's the bad side of it, right? That's the side of it that drives me nuts, is that they're making it all about them instead of making it about the product that can really be game changing. I'm trying to think. Recently, I saw something on LinkedIn. Somebody was talking about a particular company that they were an expert on, and in reality, they've never worked at that company. Maybe they're reading press releases or financial statements or something along those lines, but they have no idea about the ins and outs of what makes that company tick. And yet, there's all these people that are answering about how great they are and how insightful and everything else. And in reality, they're probably years behind in terms of, the real deal knowledge that they've got.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think if anything, like on a positive note, I mean, aside from the education and everything, I will say that for the most part, compared to even 5 years ago, and I'll include myself in that mix, I think that what's interesting is that our space has more interesting characters in it, because like if you think about it, like we as an industry, we are in a fight for talent, and so we're trying to recruit top talent from universities, other places, and we're competing with like software and big tech and everything. And so I do appreciate some of those personalities that are out there, because at least it's bringing more attention to the space. But I think you're gonna end up with like the good and the bad in there. I mean, if some of the stuff that you see in our space frustrates you, you should go see what like there's just so many random people in vertical SaaS who are just talking nonsense. But it kind of comes with the territory.
Now, back to the politician thing. There's at least 3 people that I can think of off the top of my head who are absolute experts in this space. And I won't name names, but who are experts in this space, who will not get on social media, will not get on LinkedIn, because they don't have to, because they are in fact the experts and everybody knows it.
You know what we're going to do for the audience is that off air, you're going to tell me those 3 names, and then I'm going to work very hard to get them on the show.
Sure. So you're already trying to do so.
Awesome. Hey, Joseph, look, thank you so much for coming on the show. We're really excited for all the things that are going on at Echo. Hopefully we can have you back maybe end of the year, beginning of next year, kind of give an update on what's new, because it would be really exciting to sort of hear the progress and everything. But we thank you for your time, and always great seeing. And you know what? If you're an audience member listening to this, go give Joseph and Echo a follow, okay?
Yeah, thank you, Omar. And I'm so proud of everything you're doing for this industry, and so happy for you and your family.
Thank you, sir. It's a mutual feeling. I appreciate you. All right, everybody. We'll see you all next time. Thanks for checking out this episode. If you want to do me a big favor and join so many other people who have helped grow this podcast, take a second and look below. If you're on Apple, give us 5 stars and write a short review. If you're on Spotify, just give us 5 stars. And if you're on YouTube, hit the like button. And most importantly, if you can, subscribe. We release so many different episodes that you may miss. Be sure to subscribe and turn your notifications on. You get extra points with me if you subscribe across all 3 channels. Thank you so much. And if you felt like this episode helped you, send this to somebody who'd really enjoy and appreciate it. Share and spread the love. We'll see you all next time.